Many people observed Tax Day in Massachusetts today by filing their forms with the IRS, but some activists are also marking the occasion by sending a message on how their tax dollars should be spent. This was the purpose of a rally in March scheduled for this afternoon in Dorchester. Our guest is one of the event's organizer, the outreach minister from Baraka Church in Dorchester, who's also a member of Massachusetts Peace Action, Reverend Vernon K. Walker. Thank you very much for being with us, Reverend.
Thank you.
First of all, Reverend, explain the connection between a peace organization and the budget. What's the reason for that?
Well, currently, the way things are, according to Trump's proposed budget last month, he wants to give, he wants 61% of the budget to go to military spending, which therefore would leave less for programs of social uplift, such as SNAP, such as Head Start, and the like, which millions of people depend on to help meet the needs that their family has.
Of course, one of the other things that Trump's administration has been doing, not always successfully, they're trying to have work requirements for certain benefits, whether it's the food benefits in the SNAP program or even Medicaid. I mean, what do you think about that?
Well, it's very interesting because I understand the work requirement, but some folks who are receiving these benefits are unable to work or perhaps having a difficult time finding a job. And one argument is that it may stimulate people who receive those benefits to work. The other argument that is very burdensome on those who are beneficiary of those benefits. So I think that it's really an outrage.
Well, one of the things that we keep hearing from the Trump administration, and sometimes even outside the administration, is that there are reasons for more spending on defense. I mean, the Russians are coming up with new weaponry systems that are more advanced, and we got to keep pace. So, I mean, don't they have to do some spending?
Well, it's interesting. I agree with the idea of having a military. However, I don't agree with the idea of a majority of the budget going to military spending. It's interesting because if a nation spends more on military defense and not on programs of social uplift, as Dr. King said in his Riverside speech on April 4th, 1967, then that nation is headed towards a spiritual death. And I always find it interesting how politicians swear on the Bible and they swear to uphold the principles of the Bible when they're sworn in for office, but yet won't live by the principles of the Bible. And essentially, we see very evident in the gospel peace. We see love, loving thy neighbors, loving thy enemies, and winning people over by love and not war.
Well, one thing we keep hearing from the Trump base and Trump himself is that dependency on the government is a bad thing. But what about programs that have helped people? I mean, what can you point to about government programs that have helped people get a better life?
Essentially, I can point to my own story. I am from West Philadelphia, where I was born and raised, and I grew up. And I grew up in a single-parent home, and we lived in public subsidized housing, where my mother was on food stamps, and it was very needful and helpful during that time because she had a difficult time at various periods of my childhood finding gainful employment. So I can speak to it on a personal level, how families who were not born with a silver spoon in their mouths, or children who were not born with a silver spoon in their mouths, or families who did not inherit wealth, depend on these safety net programs to get by day to day. And there are millions of others who are depending on these these programs of social uplift to help them put food on the table, help them meet the necessary requirements to pay their bills and the like.
And of course, these days, it's not just people out of work who need help from the government. I mean, I think there are a lot of people out there who work for a living, they work very hard, and they still need things like food assistance occasionally.
And absolutely, they certainly do. And there are countless of people who, again, depend on these types of programs, and slashing funding to these particular programs is very damaging and crippling to those who depend on these programs for subsistence. So I think it's really unfortunate and is really anti-peaceful to give most of the budget to military spending. And you know, Dr. King pointed out that we're all tied in the garment of mutuality. What affects one directly affects us all indirectly. So he essentially ended up saying that I can't be what I ought to be until my neighbor, my brother or my sister is what they ought to be. And then it's only through that we can achieve the best that we can become, that we can achieve self-actualization. So essentially, I think it's just hypocritical for Trump, who claims to be a devout Christian, to be excited about war and human devastation. And I looked at some statistics recently, and the amount of human deaths and since the 9/11 war is about 500, almost 500,000 people have died. That's Iraq, Palestine, and Afghanistan, not including Yemen and Syria and the like. So there have been 500,000 people, almost 500,000 people that have died because of war. And out of those 500, those near 500,000, is 220, almost 225,000 that have been casualties, civilians.
This is BNN News. We're talking with Reverend Vernon K. Walker. Reverend, I know there's a difficult calculus there, people getting killed and people feeling that we need military action for security. But you know, how do you feel? I mean, because there are people say in the government all over, you know, every time we need this to protect ourselves against terrorism or some other kind of disorder.
Well, it's interesting for people who make that argument, and I think it really stems from this idea of capitalism, and it really still stems from this idea of imperialism and wanting to have a base in various different countries to extend the influence that the U.S. has. So I think that what we should really focus on is peace building. What we should really focus on as a country in relations to other country is restorative justice and creating this beloved community.
Well, the peace building, you have people who are scheduled to be out near Upham's Corner tonight. What's that going to be like? Oh,
that should be exciting. We have the Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley and a host of other speakers who are coming together, which is the 8th annual event of coming together on tax day here in Massachusetts, to say that we should there should be a direct connection between uplifting the poor and how our budget is spent. So to divest in military spending and invest more in programs of social uplift. So it's going to be a rally tonight from 4:30 to 8:30. There's a litany of speakers who are really from various organizations who are speaking to this idea of creating this beloved community, which the main ingredient is divesting monies from war and investing more into programs of social uplift.
Well, just last night, at least at the end of the day, there was a recreation on the City Hall Plaza of Martin Luther King's open letter from Birmingham jail, a call to social justice. You were there. What was that like?
Oh, it was amazing. We've had union leaders, we've had clergy, we had community activists, and the like. We had the people from various walks of life coming together to lift up that beautiful passage that Dr. King wrote while he was sitting in the Birmingham jail in 1963. When we had over 100 readers read the Birmingham letter.
We should mention finally, if people want to find out more about Mass Peace Action and keep up with what's happening in the budget, is there some way they can do that?
Yes, they can go to the website, www.masspeaceaction.org, or they can Google Tax Day 2019 rally, and there will be some links that comes up that people can tap into.
Thank you very much for being with us. Reverend Vernon K. Walker from Mass Peace Action and Baraka Church in Dorchester.